She had 12 months to save the bakery and her future. Emma stepped off the bus into the damp, salt-scented air of the coastal town. The fog hung low over cobblestone streets, turning street lamps into halos of soft light. She adjusted her coat and dragged her suitcase along the uneven pavement, glancing at the small, weather-beaten buildings. London had been relentless, exhausting, and she had come here thinking this inheritance would be a simple transaction: claim, sell, and leave. 12 months running a bakery in a sleepy town was never part of the plan. The bakery came into view, a weather-beaten building perched at the harbor's edge. Through the fogged windows, a man was methodically kneading dough. As Emma entered, he looked up, his dark eyes wary. "You must be Emma," he said, his voice low and measured. "I'm Jack." Before she could respond, the notary arrived, her heels clicking sharply on the tiles. She didn't offer condolences or hesitation, just the terms of the will. "According to your aunt's wishes," she said, voice precise, "the property may only be sold if the bakery operates for 12 months and is profitable. Any abandonment before that, and the estate passes to her son, Sean." Emma's stomach tightened. 12 months. This wasn't a vacation, it was a commitment. She looked at Jack, whose posture was steady but alert, and realized they were now partners in circumstance whether they liked it or not. "Fine," she said, determination threading her words. "Then we do this. But we do it right." Jack's eyes flickered with faint surprise at her assertiveness. "Good. Then let's get started." Inside the apartment above the bakery, the air smelled of flour and old wood, warm but sharp with the tang of rising dough. Emma placed her suitcase in the corner and took a deep breath. Jack moved efficiently, stacking trays and checking ovens. There was a rhythm to him, disciplined and precise. She observed quietly, noting every motion, every careful adjustment, a hint of admiration creeping in. Their first morning together was silent, focused. Emma spread out her notebook, ideas for marketing, social media, and specialty pastries. Jack kneaded, measured, adjusted ovens. They worked in parallel, two worlds intersecting without much dialogue. Hours passed, and Emma began to speak, cautiously at first. "I didn't come here for vacation," she admitted quietly as she adjusted a tray. "My career in London, it collapsed. Politics, colleagues, deadlines. I burned out. I thought I could just leave, sell, and be done. But maybe this is a second chance." Jack paused his work, wiping flour from his hands. "It's not easy here either," he said, tone steady but tinged with fatigue. 10 years I've been helping your aunt. This bakery, it's more than bread. It's memories, routines, responsibility. I can't just walk away. If it fails, I lose a piece of myself too." Emma nodded, the gravity of their situation settling around them. "Then we keep it alive. We adapt, we learn, and we protect it. Together." She didn't want to admit how the word "together" already carried weight, but she felt it nonetheless. Jack allowed himself a faint nod, a small sign of approval. "Then let's get to work. Early mornings, long days. No shortcuts. The town will judge our results, not our excuses." As the autumn chill deepened, the silence between them evolved into a precise, rhythmic language of labor. Emma's observation of Jack became more clinical, yet more empathetic. She began to time her movements to his, anticipating when he would need a tray or a fresh bowl of water. She saw the cost of his decade of loyalty in the stiff way he moved before dawn and the quiet exhaustion that shadowed his eyes. The bakery was no longer a temporary detour from her failed London career. It had become a strategic fortress. Every loaf pulled from the oven was a small, calculated victory against the 12-month clock ticking in the back of her mind. The harbor fog remained a constant sentinel, but inside, the air was thick with the scent of proofing dough and the growing, unspoken realization that their partnership was the only thing keeping the estate from Sean's grasp. She was no longer just waiting for the year to end. She was preparing for the siege. As winter tightened its grip on the coast, the physical demands of the bakery pushed Emma's endurance to its limit. The morning routine, once a source of friction, had become a grind that smoothed her jagged edges, replacing city anxiety with the raw, honest fatigue of manual labor. Her apartment upstairs was still filled with the physical remains of her aunt's life, but the cluttered boxes now felt like a historical archive she was responsible for protecting. Every evening, As the tide pulled the gray sea away from the harbor, she found herself less concerned with the life she had lost in London and more consumed by the logistics of the months remaining. By the fourth month, the shared silence in the kitchen had transformed into a tactical coordination. Jack no longer simply occupied the space. He moved through it with a deliberate economy of motion that Emma had learned to mirror. One morning, as a shipment of heavy rye flour arrived, she stepped in to catch the weight of a slipping pallet without being asked. There was no exchange of gratitude, only a brief meeting of eyes that acknowledged the mounting physical toll of their defiance. The coffee he left for her each morning was no longer a peace offering, but a ration for the long hours of inventory and repair that lay ahead of them. As the seasons shifted from winter to the biting winds of early spring, their conversations evolved from logistical necessities to a shared defense strategy. During the sparse breaks between bakes, Emma began to strip away the polished veneer of her London life, admitting the granular details of her professional collapse. Jack, in return, unburdened himself of the decade of isolation he'd endured keeping the bakery afloat. This mutual vulnerability solidified into a professional respect that Sean's growing presence could not penetrate. The tension between them was no longer a distraction but an engine, driving them to optimize every recipe and repair. When the spring storms finally began to batter the harbor, Emma found herself responding to the chaos with a calm, instinctive speed that even Jack couldn't ignore. "You're not just surviving this," he remarked one evening as they braced the heavy window shutters together. "You're running it." It was the first time she felt the 12-month sentence start to feel like a chosen life. By the 6th month, the apartment above the bakery had transformed from a temporary shelter into a command center. Emma spent her nights cross-referencing ledger entries with the inventory Jack maintained with obsessive detail, ensuring every gram of flour was accounted for before Sean's inspectors arrived. The fog outside remained an oppressive, silver-gray weight, but the internal rhythm of the bakery had become her new clock. She watched Jack work in the dim light of the cooling ovens, recognizing that their alliance had moved beyond a legal necessity into a deeply synchronized defense. The London deadlines that once haunted her dreams were replaced by the temperature of the hearth and the timing of the morning crust. This wasn't just a reprieve from her old life. It was a deliberate reconstruction of a new one, built on the steady, grinding reality of shared labor and the silent, growing assurance that they were no longer fighting this battle in isolation. Fog rolled thick over the cobblestone streets, turning the town into a blur of gray. Inside the bakery, Emma arranged freshly baked pastries on the counter, trying to maintain focus, but a subtle unease tugged at her. Jack worked at the long wooden table, kneading dough, his movements steady but eyes flicking occasionally to the window. Something was off. It began quietly. Flour shipments were delayed, ingredients misdirected. Then, a letter from Sean slipped under the door. "Ensure the bakery meets standards. I will be observing. Mistakes have consequences." No overt threat, but the intent was clear. Emma felt a flicker of irritation. "He's planning something," she said quietly. Jack paused, muscles tensed. "He's always waiting for a mistake," he said. "He doesn't act unless there's opportunity." Later that day, Sean appeared at the bakery, impeccably dressed, carrying himself with the air of someone used to control. "Emma," he said smoothly, "how are the city ideas working out? Instagram specials, matcha lattes?" His voice was low, measured. "I hope Jack isn't hiding agreements from you. You wouldn't want surprises in your own home." Emma stiffened, doubt creeping into her chest. Could Jack be complicit? Her mind raced, but she forced herself to remain calm. Jack's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the dough. "What do you mean?" he asked evenly, but the tension was palpable. Sean's smile widened. "Oh, nothing yet. Just be careful. People do things quietly to survive." Over the next days, Sean escalated his tactics. He hired a local legal consultant to inspect the bakery, citing minor structural issues and regulatory concerns. Shipments were delayed, small mistakes magnified, and whispered insinuations sown to undermine their trust. Each act chipped at their sense of stability. Emma noticed her own reactions, sudden tension when Jack left the room, the gnawing fear that she might misjudge him. But she fought to remain rational. She coordinated inventory, cross-checked deliveries, and kept detailed logs to preempt any legal challenge. She refused to fall into panic. Jack saw the strain in her. Her guarded glances, the clipped tone, the cautious movements, all subtle but telling. He felt his own frustration and exhaustion rise, but he masked it with quiet diligence, kneading dough, repairing minor equipment, and reminding himself that surrender was not an option. One evening, as the fog thickened and the bakery lights cast warm halos, Emma spoke softly, voice tense. "He's trying to make us doubt each other, make us falter." Jack nodded, pausing in his work. "Then we don't. We have evidence, logs, witnesses. We respond, not react. That's the difference." Their partnership grew stronger under the pressure. Actions replaced words. Emma meticulously organized shipments and accounts. Jack strengthened the ovens and shelves, and together they anticipated every challenge. The psychological games Sean played had a target, but he underestimated their resilience. By the end of the week, Sean attempted another move, claiming a structural hazard was Jack's fault, implying negligence. Emma, anticipating such maneuvers, produced detailed repair logs and photographic evidence of prior conditions. Jack spoke calmly to the consultant, demonstrating the preventive steps taken. Sean's confident posture faltered slightly, the first real crack in his composed exterior. Alone later, Emma exhaled, feeling a mixture of fatigue and relief. "We can't let him get to us," she said. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, steady, but with a hint of shared exhaustion. "We won't. He can try, but we're prepared. And we have each other. That's stronger than any threat." Outside, the fog enveloped the town, waves crashing against cliffs, the wind carrying a chill. Inside, the bakery hummed with warmth and purpose. Flour-dusted counters, ovens glowed, and two people, tested by threats, uncertainty, and fear, had learned to navigate trust and partnership in the face of manipulation. Sean had begun his psychological war, but Emma and Jack had found their strategy, preparation, vigilance, and absolute reliance on one another. They were ready for whatever escalation awaited them. Together, they would endure, respond, and, when necessary, fight back. The wind screamed through the town, a wild, unrelenting force that rattled windows and tore at the edges of shutters. Rain fell in sheets, slapping the cobblestones and sending water cascading down the streets toward the harbor. Inside the bakery, Emma's heart pounded as she checked the ovens and trays. The smell of wet wood and rising dough mingled in the warm air, but it was not enough to calm the tension that gnawed at her. Jack moved quickly, securing loose equipment and checking the roof beams. His muscles strained as he lifted a waterlogged tray, but he never faltered. "Emma, we need to cover the back window," he shouted over the roar of the storm. Emma grabbed tarps and sandbags, moving decisively, her mind racing through possible solutions. "We can't let the ovens get wet. If the equipment fails, we lose months of work." Her London-honed decisiveness took over. Fear still touched her chest, but she focused on action. Outside, the storm was brutal. Sean's earlier legal maneuvering added weight to their struggle. The structural inspection he had arranged highlighted the weakened roof. Any damage could now be cited to challenge the inheritance. This wasn't just nature. They were fighting against human scheming as well. A sudden crack echoed through the bakery. A section of the roof above the main oven splintered under the pounding rain. Water poured in like a river, threatening the freshly kneaded dough. Emma lunged forward, gripping the wood and forcing a tarp over the opening. Jack joined her, muscles taut, eyes dark with concentration. Each flash of lightning illuminated their frantic movements, every shadow revealing another looming danger. Throughout the long, drenching hours, the rhythm they had perfected over the previous months became their lifeline. While Jack wrestled with the splintering beams, his hands raw and slick with rainwater, Emma operated with a cold, administrative precision. She moved through the flooding kitchen not as a stranger, but as a commander, salvage tagging equipment and ensuring the thermal integrity of the ovens. The panic that would have paralyzed her in London was gone, replaced by a singular, focused objective, protecting the sanctuary they had built brick by brick. Every action was a testament to the quiet trust that had solidified in the silence of the winter mornings. Sean attempted to escalate, even now. Through the rain and howling wind, messages arrived. Minor building complaints, potential insurance issues, implied negligence. But Emma, prepared, documented every action. She photographed water damage, tracked every repair, and cross-referenced the logs Jack had kept for years. Each action became evidence, a buffer against Sean's manipulations. As the first gray light of dawn broke over the harbor, the bakery stood as a damp but defiant survivor. Emma stood amidst the wreckage of ruined dough and puddles, her exhaustion tempered by the realization that their defensive preparations had held. She looked at the stack of date-stamped photographs and the meticulously maintained repair logs that she had shielded from the rain with her own coat. Jack joined her, his face a mask of soot and fatigue, but his eyes were clear. "The structure is sound enough to pass an honest inspection," he noted, his voice raspy from the cold. Emma tapped the ledger on the counter. "And this is our shield." Sean didn't just underestimate the building. He underestimated the paper trail. Emma's eyes met his, gratitude and something more shining through. "Together," she said, a word that now carried real weight. "Yes," Jack replied, exhaustion softened by satisfaction. "And we face what comes next together." Outside, the fog lingered over the cliffs and harbor, the wind softened to a persistent howl, and the town emerged from the storm, quiet but unbroken. Inside, flour-dusted counters, ovens hummed, and two people, tested by both nature and human deceit, had proven their resilience. The storm had threatened to destroy their work, their trust, even their hope, but they had endured. Emma realized, for the first time fully, that the bakery was no longer just property or inheritance. It was a symbol of persistence, of careful planning, of trust forged under pressure. And most importantly, it was theirs, not by chance, but by courage, skill, and unwavering partnership. The town was still damp from the storm, but the first rays of sunlight filtered through the clouds, glinting off wet cobblestones and the harbor waves. Inside the bakery, Emma and Jack moved methodically, repairing minor damage, checking ovens, and salvaging as much dough as they could. The storm had been brutal, but their perseverance had kept the heart of the bakery alive. Emma laid out the photos, logs, and repair records she had meticulously collected during the storm. "Jack," she said, voice firm but excited, "these aren't just evidence of repairs. This proves Sean's claims were false. Any legal challenge he tries will collapse under this documentation." Jack nodded, wiping his brow, muscles sore from hours of lifting and fixing. "He underestimated us. He thought fear and manipulation would break our partnership. But we planned, we acted, and we documented every step. He doesn't stand a chance." The town, curious about the bakery's resilience, began trickling in. Locals offered help with repairs, brought ingredients, and shared encouragement. Emma quickly realized that the community itself was a shield, a living testament to their efforts. "We're not just saving a building," she told Jack. "We're building something bigger than ourselves." A week later, the legal hearing commenced. Sean's attorney presented the structural complaint, but Emma and Jack submitted the meticulously organized evidence: photos of the pre-storm conditions, repair logs, and eyewitness statements from townspeople who had witnessed both the storm and their work. The judge reviewed the documentation, asked a few pointed questions, and, after careful consideration, ruled in favor of Emma and Jack. Sean's legal maneuver collapsed. Defeated, Sean left the courtroom, the first true loss he had experienced. His expression was tight, frustration visible, but the law had spoken. Emma felt a rush of relief, tempered by exhaustion. "It's over," she said, leaning against Jack as they stepped into the sunlight. Outside, the town square buzzed with energy. Emma and Jack organized a community celebration, tables lined with pastries, breads, and hot drinks. Children ran between stalls, laughter echoing against the harbor. The bakery had become the heart of the town, a symbol of resilience and collaboration. Jack handed a tray of warm bread to a neighbor and caught Emma's eye. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement and fatigue, a radiant smile stretching across her face. He reached for her hand, fingers intertwining naturally. "We did this together," he said softly. Emma squeezed his hand, her heart swelling. "And we choose to keep it. Not because of money, but because of what it's become. This bakery, this town, it's ours, our home." The transition from the 11th to the 12th month was marked not by a legal deadline, but by the seamless integration of their lives into the town's fabric. The bakery had evolved into a fortress of local resilience, its ledgers finally reflecting the profitability their aunt had demanded. On the final evening of their court-mandated year, Emma stood by the window, watching the harbor lights sweep across the cliffs. The offer to sell for a staggering sum sat on the counter, but it felt like a relic from a life she no longer recognized. Jack approached her, the flower on his apron a familiar mark of their shared history. "The clock has stopped," he said quietly. Emma turned to him, realizing that the partnership forged in the winter storms had become her most permanent structure. "We're not selling," she replied, the decision as solid as the hearth. "This isn't an inheritance anymore. It's a foundation." As they stepped back into the warmth of the glowing ovens, the year of trial ended, leaving behind a legacy built not on paper, but on the enduring strength of what they had protected together.